Hey guys, quick video on the Uyghur situation in China, but a particularly crucial one because in this one, I'm going to tie together some of the ideas, some of the loose ends, where I started in being suspicious of this whole narrative. Just slightly suspicious at first, mainly just finding it very interesting. And then ultimately coming around to doubting all the crucial genocide claims when I was really researching them and the methodology of how they're found out, doubting all of the Uyghur refugee stories. When you really break them down, there's plenty of evidence that shows to some extent that this is not happening. There are re-education camps. China readily admits that. And we can go in, we got photos, video, mainly of the re-education itself. But how these are actually functioning, the birth rate suppression claims, and how many there are, the million-plus claims, all these crucial claims are not brought together by statistical evidence. And actually reading over the reports on this, the researchers supposedly, they didn't really do a good job of saving what they found. So it could just as well be made up in terms of the larger claims. So that's my general summary of where it is. You can watch the video or listen to the whole thing in the background if you're curious about it. But I was initially suspicious of this just because I was noticing that all this liberal news media and the Democrats were finally condemning China. In contrast to how they reacted during COVID, coronavirus, and in contrast to how they reacted to Hong Kong, other genocides we see, all of a sudden these groups were suddenly interested in it. And at the same time, China is doing some of the saving face. They're denying some of the crucial claims, but they still make it sound pretty oppressive, and they're not actually going in as hard on the statistical evidence itself as I do in my video. So that surprised me. I'll show you a video here.
Almost certainly over northern China, over Xinjiang. Can you tell us what is happening here?
I cannot see, this video. This is not the first time you show me. I still remember last year you showed me what is happening in Xinjiang.
In Xinjiang, exactly.
But let me tell you this. Xinjiang, have you been to Xinjiang yourself?
No, I never have.
Xinjiang is regarded as the most beautiful place in Xinjiang. There's a Chinese saying, you do not know how big China is.
Ambassador, that is not beautiful coverage, however, is it?
Xinjiang, that is exactly what I'm going to tell you. Since 1990, Xinjiang has completely changed because there's thousands of terrorist attacks. People cannot...
That was 10 years ago. Can I ask you why people are kneeling, blindfolded and shaven and being led to trains in modern China? What is going on there?
I do not know where you get this videotape. Sometimes you have a transfer of prisons and prisoners, in any country.
But just what is happening here, Ambassador?
I do not know. Where did you get these video clips?
These have been going around the world. They've been authenticated by Western intelligence agencies and by Australian experts.
Now, this video I played towards the end, and it's used to showcase lying on both sides, the Western and the Chinese media. And so for the Western media, the line I'm showcasing is about making the Uyghur narrative more of a victim narrative than it actually is, because they do a lot to cover up the massive amounts of Uyghur terrorism there. But the Chinese narrative, it's like, oh, I can't see, no, there's not a million, certainly. Or, no, we're not torturing them, that kind of stuff, which, we can tell from refugees coming out of there. They're not really being tortured. The whole birth control thing, I still don't know if they're ever going to have a single doctor check a single refugee for what should be blatantly obvious medical situations. So all of this line, though, my point is the Chinese aren't going in as hard on this narrative as I am. And I think I know the reason. And I think I know the reason also that all of a sudden you have groups that normally work hand in hand with the Chinese, the Democrats, liberal media, all of a sudden condemn China a little bit for this, condemn them enough. And the reason for this is because condemning China for this, but not an outright genocide is to their benefit. You see, the Uyghurs, as I covered in my video, have received a lot of affirmative action, and they cost a lot of money, and they did plenty of terrorism. So in all senses, the Uyghurs were before a massive net negative to the Chinese. So why not give them independence anyways? The answer is because the Uyghurs have a ton of land, and a ton of valuable land with natural resources in it. So the benefit for China would actually be to get rid of the Uyghurs. So you say, well, yeah, then they want genocide. And certainly I'd say that's one reason that it was really dumb that China actually suppressed the birth rates of their Han Chinese while letting ethnic minorities like the Uyghurs grow for many years before this. But the idea there is that they were potentially just catching flies with honey to get this land. And, you know, they were going with older, almost liberal ideas about you can reform these people. They were using a Han older brother mentality, I read. Like this idea of we can help the backwards people, we'll make languages for them. If all this sounds familiar, we'll give them massive affirmative action in their own schools just to make them like us again, and it didn't work. You know, all that liberalism that they actually did apply there did not work, so they've reformed and now they're using more oppressive means because since they realized it didn't work, they more tactically realize that they have several options, and the main option that would be most beneficial for them is to get rid of the Uyghurs and keep the land. Because otherwise the Uyghurs aren't really going to leave that land. They've been there for potentially thousands and thousands of years. It is their land. But how do you get rid of them? Well, the first, you've got encouraging the Han Chinese to colonize this area. And when that just resulted in more terrorism, what next? Well, you have to contain them. Now, if you make it look oppressive, but not outright genocidal, you know, not just lining people up and shooting it to outrage the Western media, and especially to outrage nearby nations and all of the many Muslim majority nations that are supporting China's actions through it because they have gotten this other narrative, then you can still do business. And that's something like the Chinese running up to this have gotten signatures from a whole lot of countries that actually support them on this. So China can still do business. They can look oppressive towards the Uyghurs. But at the end of this, if they're oppressive but not too oppressive, you know, if they're not actually genocidal, which it seems like they really aren't in this case, then they can win. It's a win-win scenario. They contain the Uyghurs for now, you know, just detention. Certainly detention of all the radical elements, more policing, more biometric scanning, all that great stuff. But then Western media is instructed to be much more sympathetic, to think the word genocide, genocide, genocide over and over against in their head, while friendly nations towards China don't have to think about genocide at all. So that's the reason that China is going in hard in the narrative, but not as hard as I would. Because in the end of this, their maximum benefit is to send the Uyghurs to us. You get the idea, too, of why then all of a sudden liberal media and Democrats like that, too. Because they can be hand in hand with China on this. You know, China doesn't want the Uyghurs, and people who hate the West want us to have Uyghurs. So win-win for China and lose-lose for us if we keep this narrative up.
I detect a little communism. I can see it in the things you do. Communism, socialism, call it what you like. There's very little difference in the two. Now ain't I right? Ain't I right?